Here's Piers Morgan to completely misunderstand how the universe works.
Fascinating. And my final question is probably the biggest question I can ask any guest. And I've asked quite a few of them. I have to say with very limited responses. So I'm asking two highly intelligent people at this question now, which is I happen to believe in God. And the reason I do, other than the fact I was reared as a Catholic by my mother, is because I genuinely think there must be a superior being out there.
Superior in what sense? What does superior mean in this context? This is like the ontological argument defining God as the greatest conceivable being without really unpacking what greatest means or how it can be objectively measured.
Who is able to answer this fundamental question in a way no human being has been able to answer it for me, which is for those who believe in the Big Bang Theory, what was there before the Big Bang? In other words, what was nothing? And what was there before nothing?
There never was nothing. There was never a time when nothing existed because at all points in time, at the very least, time would have had to exist. Either time stretches backward infinitely or time had an earliest moment. In either case, it doesn't make sense to say that anything was before time. Before is a temporal orientation, and it makes no sense to have a temporal orientation independent of time itself. It makes even less sense to say there was anything before nothing.
And because I do not believe a human brain can answer that question.
Yes, human brains tend to have trouble answering questions that don't make any sense.
There must be, de facto, a more superior thing out there that can.
Or maybe the question doesn't make sense and therefore can't be answered at all.
Sean.
Well, I'm glad to be the one who frees you from your religious convictions because the human brain can absolutely tackle that question, and it does so all the time. I encourage viewers/listeners to listen to the upcoming episode of my podcast called Mindscape, where I talk to Nies Afshorty and Phil Halper about exactly this question. What happened at or before the Big Bang?
Yeah.
We don't know the answer. We don't even know whether the Big Bang was the beginning.
Well, there you go.
So the fact that we don't know doesn't mean we can't know. Those are two very different statements.
Well, if you don't know, you can't know at the moment. Surely you have to admit you don't know.
Can't know at the moment is a pretty different goalpost from human brains can't know at all.
I don't know, and we're doing science on it in the hopes that we will know.
Yeah, but
That's how
with respect,
works.
Sean, with respect, it is utterly impossible. You will never, as a human being, be able to tell me what was there before nothing. How can you?
That's true, because there never was nothing, and asking what was there before nothing wouldn't make any sense even if the universe were preceded by nothing. The only sense in which it is coherent to say that the universe was preceded by nothing is in the sense that it wasn't preceded at all. Piers talks about nothing as though it is a thing or a state of affairs. The universe was not preceded by any state of affairs. The universe is the space-time continuum, so the universe has been around for as long as time has.
You can't comprehend it, can you?
I come up with a theory. I show that the theory fits the data. That's how we do it.
What was there before
is.
nothing, then? Go on, best guess.
We don't know. My personal favorite theory is there was a pre-existing universe out of which our cosmos arose as a baby universe
And what was there
due to a
before
quantum
that?
fluctuation.
What was there before that?
No, it's infinite in time in both directions.
So what was there before? So you mean it's never ending?
Yeah. I wrote a book, if you want to read it, Piers.
I do.
From Eternity to Here. It's a great book.
I do, but what's there before eternity?
What would before eternity mean? Eternity has no beginning by definition. How can anything be before something that has no beginning?
There was no such thing as before eternity. Like, what is less than minus infinity? That's not a sensible question to ask.
Yeah, but I think it's a cop-out by you, if you don't mind me saying this very respectfully, to say that something is infinite, because if you're saying it's infinite, you don't have to answer the question.
It's a cop-out to infer infinity from the evidence? It would be a cop-out if Sean were speculating that time is infinite in both directions just to avoid inferring a cause of the universe, but he's not doing that. He's inferring that it's infinite because the evidence seems to indicate that.
You've just made that up. You don't know it was infinite.
Inferring something from the evidence is not just making it up.
This very often happens in the progress of human knowledge, that a question that we thought was an interesting one becomes not answered, but shown to be uninteresting because we get a deeper understanding.
See, that, I'm sorry. I'm going to come to you, Eric, on this. That seems to me a very pompous answer. That is basically trying to apply a superior intelligence to a response to a lesser mortal by saying that my attempt to get this question answered is so stupid that there should be no need by the brain power in front of me to answer it.
Well, sometimes the truth hurts, Piers. What would be the non-pompous response to a question that makes no sense? You just want Sean to throw up his hands and say, "It's a mystery only God can solve. I'm just not as much of a smarty pants as I let on." Would that make you feel better, Piers?
No, it's exactly the opposite of that. I don't know why people are trying to psychoanalyze me and think about what I'm thinking of them. What I'm saying is the question of what happened before the Big Bang is prima facie a perfectly sensible question to ask. But we need to be open to the possibility that there is no beginning to the universe, that the universe is simply...
Yeah, but that is a ridiculous thing to say, because you know that your human brain cannot comprehend something that has no beginning.
As Bertrand Russell pointed out, there's no logical problem with a series that has no first term. Why would something with no beginning be any harder to comprehend than something with no end? Nobody insists that the universe must stop existing at some point in the future, so what's the problem with the idea that it didn't start either? Why does the latter bother you so much more than the former? Also, if human brains can't comprehend something that has no beginning, then either God had a beginning, or human brains can't comprehend God, and how am I supposed to believe in something if I can't even comprehend what it is? If God did have a beginning, what was before God? If he didn't, then why don't you have as much of a problem with that as you do with the universe not having a beginning?
How can it? We can't.
I can comprehend the real numbers. They go from minus infinity to infinity. I don't see why it's harder to comprehend infinity years versus 14 billion years. That doesn't make sense to me.
You smug scientists are all the same with your expecting things to make sense. It's a good thing Eric Weinstein is there. He's a cool scientist who doesn't gatekeep science by demanding coherence. And he hangs out with Terrence Howard and pretends that he's not an unhinged crackpot.
All right, Eric, am I mad?
No, I mean, look, one of the things I like, Piers, is that you invite me on this program often not to do battle, as we heard in the previous segments.
Eric loves that Piers usually doesn't question him or have him on with other guests who question him. His shtick lately has been to go on podcasts and whine about how elitist the scientific establishment is because they don't take his ideas seriously. And he flatters everyone who is suspicious of science and scientists. The main reason he's on Piers's show with Sean is because Sean doesn't take Eric's ideas seriously either.
But just to be clear, Eric, like Sean, I think I've got a point of where you both come to the same place here. You don't actually know, do you? What was there before nothing?
No, absolutely not.
I would love to. You know what? I would love to.
Way,
given I've only understood about 1/10 of what either of you has said for the last hour, I would like to end on a point where none of us know the answer to something, because it makes me feel slightly less stupid.
I get the impression that this is ultimately the whole reason he bothered to disagree with Sean in the first place.
To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.